How are you doing, everybody? This is Cathal Jack here, vocal coach. I'm about to have a conversation with a good old friend of mine, someone that I've worked with a lot over the years, Mr. Dave Skelton, who is a producer, who is also a mixing engineer, and really has a great knack for helping develop talent. So what we're going to talk about today is just some of the things that we as singers can first of all expect from working with someone like Dave, but also how we can help him do his job even better as well. So, Mr. Dave Skelton, thank you. Tell us a little
Oh,
bit about yourself and what it is you do.
thanks for having me on, Carl. First of all, that's great. I'm a record producer and mixer based in Galway. Generally, if somebody is working with me, what they can expect really is help. Help and quality. The amount of help required will depend on where the artist is, at what stage of development they're at. But basically, we look at developing the right sound for that artist, based on who they are, and what they're best at. We make sure that their lyrics resonate with listeners. We make sure that the song, when it's fully produced and finished, retains the attention of the people who listen to it. Via having a good tight structure, and obviously the certain elements in the production that will keep that attention. And then just really having a pro sound. And you say I do take this holistic approach. Because it's very important. It's as important as having a great sounding song at the end of it. So I do like to guide the artists on what they need to do, again based on what point of their development they're at, within the music industry, where they need to go next and what they need to do.
Yeah, and when you're doing that, is there a line in your mind when you're working, you described, or you used the word there, holistic. Is there a line where you in your role must be aware that I don't want to impose my values or my wants and likes too much on them as I'm helping them to draw out their own personality, their own sound and their own style?
That will come down to it's different for everybody. So some people have a very good picture of where they're at, and some people know what they're good at. Mm-hmm. Some people don't know what they're good at, and sometimes it's a case of going with it. But sometimes it's a case of people can they can be singing the wrong types of songs for their voice. Which is there are a lot of things within this where again, artists will start off at a certain point thinking that they want something in particular. Sometimes, what's really obvious are, sometimes there's certain things right in front of them that you just need to point out to them, and they can go from there. But really, until that foundation is right, and until everything makes sense with regards to who the artist is, it doesn't work. But as soon as, they find that little corner for themselves, where they're really comfortable, generally that's where things will start to take off for them.
And taking what you describe as that little corner for them, and something that you said as well is that some people, they know what their strengths are and they're also aware of their weaknesses, and you said that some aren't. I always find being in a similar situation sometimes as a vocal coach, where you are dealing with people that are very clear about what it is they want to work on, and there are others that really, they don't realize the amount of work that they may have to do. The idea of how do you, especially from the perspective of someone who's maybe new to this world of recording, which can be daunting, being surrounded by all this equipment and working to the standard of someone that, that produces music like you do. How do you bring someone with you without, not so much in a way of bruising their ego, but massaging their confidence?
Yeah, well, look, it's very important to remember, when when I have a singer songwriter in here in the studio with me, you know, when they're in there laying down a track, they really are bearing their soul. And you know, for me, it's, you know, it's of absolute high importance, you know, that you know, first of all, that I can empathize with where they're at, and you know, don't get me wrong, you know, you need to be really, really kind in this role, and you really need to kind of to go through the process with them and feel it all out. So look at, you know, it's again, you know, it'll depend on, you know, where the artist, it depends what the issue is, you know, if they're not kind of hitting their own high standard, or their own standard, there's normally something slightly amiss. Okay, so you know, sometimes it's just that they have come into a sterile environment, which is, you know, the recording studio. It's a weird place to be singing, you know. It's you're singing in a dead air, you know. There's nothing reverberating around the room, and you're just hearing what you hear back in your headphones. And sometimes it's just a case of, you know, relaxing into that environment, and you know, even in your head, you know, going to the place where you're normally most comfortable singing. So it can be that. You know, sometimes it just takes time. You know, the lyrics might be new, and they mightn't be completely comfortable with delivering those lyrics yet. So sometimes you just have to give people time to get into it. And then sometimes, you know, as we're going through it, you know, we can figure out, oh, well, hang on a second, this key isn't quite right, that we need to sometimes bring the key up, sometimes bring the key down. And it can very often be a tempo thing as well, where, you know, tempo can, you know, hugely affect the delivery for a vocalist. You know, if the tempo isn't right, you know, it can take them way outside their comfort zone. So we have to feel our way around and find the right tempo and the right key.
I absolutely agree about tempo, and particularly key. Again, as a voice coach, you're always looking to bring the singer to the most comfortable part of their voice, to allow them to express themselves. And if you get either of those wrong, you can really put yourself under so much pressure. So I think you're absolutely right there. But I was struck as well by what you said about empathy. And again, speaking as a voice coach, trying to imagine myself in the position of a singer and working to help the singer to draw out the performer that they have in them, understanding, you know, that they feel as they do is really important. But is there a line as well? And this is something I often wonder about, because we can strive to be technically perfect, but sometimes the greatest part that humanizes us as singers is that frailty. Maybe that's the wrong word, but that vulnerability where the voice seems like it's putting its toes on the edge of where it's comfortable. And that at that moment, you know, we're probably at our most expressive. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, look at it. It's like everything, Carl, and you know, and you know, really, it's you know, in the life of any artist, you know, or anyone kind of putting out their own music, everything has to be right. Okay, so like you will, you know, if you're taking, you know, having the right feel versus the right the right technicalities when you're singing, certainly, you know, if you're not a technical singer, you have to get the feel right. Okay, so you know, it's not going to work without the feel, and you know, you really have to feel it, like, and this is regardless of whether you're a technical singer or not. You have to feel it, and wherever you were, whatever place you were in when you wrote that song, you know, whether it's a song about a really hard time you went through, or whether it's a song reminiscing of something, you have to go to that place in your head to deliver the feel, because it does not come across otherwise. You know, when you're recording in a sterile environment, you really have to bring that feeling. Okay. Now, having said that, on the technical side, if you can combine that with technique, then that is the point where you're, you know, absolutely on the money, and you know, you really, you know, that'll be the point where you just can't get better than it.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree with that. And a refrain that a lot of my students would hear me say a lot of the time is, give me the singer that has feel ahead of the technical singer any day. But when you put the two together, it is formidable. To that, how, because I was struck by what you said about a singer having to bring themselves to that place to connect with the song. What can a singer in your studio do to make your job easier to help them be the best they can be?
Um, okay, well, the first thing is, if you're coming in to lay down vocals, make sure you've looked after yourself the day before. So, you like singers generally know themselves, under what kind of conditions they perform best. So, just don't take a chance on those conditions. Make sure you're in good nick, because really, it will avoid you having to come back in on another day to get those vocals down. Another one, and this one catches a lot of people out. Know your lyrics inside out. Very often when the singer comes in, the song or maybe part of the song might be newly written. They might have had their verse and chorus all along, but they've had to record a second verse or the last verse and a bridge or something like that. And when they're not familiar with it, they're focusing on actually reading the lyrics, okay? And then they lose all the feel because they can't put themselves into that place where they need to go to get the feel across. So that'd be a big one is know your lyrics if possible when you come in. Another one then would be just be patient with yourself, okay? When you're recording vocals, and try not to get frustrated if you're not nailing it. There's no limit on the number of takes you can do, and basically if somebody gets to the point where they're frustrated, that's it. You kind of have to leave it at that point, and you end up not getting the best out of it. Whereas if you can stick with it and keep trying and keep going, I'll keep thinking I'm going to get it on the next take. That's it. And another is, I suppose, the last one, and this is kind of this is a nice to have, but if you can have harmonies worked out, if you do harmonies and if you're familiar with harmonies, if you can have some worked out before you come in, if you're going to lay them down yourself, just take a little bit of time to have a fool around with them and try and figure them out.
Excellent. It seems so obvious what you said about lyrics, but I suppose it just speaks to not laziness, but the fact that songwriting it's a process that's always moving, it's always fluid, it never stops, even up until the last minute. So if someone knows they're in with Dave on the 29th of October, they're going to say, right, I'm still going to be working on this song until the night of the 28th. So it's an interesting thing. One last question, and just a quick, brief, kind of bite-sized answer. I had a student today, for instance, who sent me a demo. He's a teenager, and he's done his first mix, and he asked me rather to give him feedback just to get an idea of what an independent pair of ears would think of how it sounded. What would you say to someone who is going into a studio for the first time or is recording for the first time is the most important thing to keep in mind?
Yeah, okay, well, I suppose, basically if you're hiring somebody, take their advice if you can, but I'd also say to trust yourself as well, and to get that balance between, okay, that obviously, if you're working with someone like me who's worked on hundreds of songs and with loads of different artists, I will spot things quite quickly, but at the same time, if you have a niggle yourself and somebody's pushing you down a road where you don't think it's right, you need to put your hand up, and to really trust your own good instinct as well. Other than that, like, it's just a matter, if it's your first time in, just relax and do your best. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because obviously that's how we get better. We get better by making mistakes. Again, there's no limit on the takes you can do. It's just part of your growth and experience. Don't get hung up on imperfections. So it's at times you'd be listening back to your own voice and you'd be going, oh God, that could be better. At that point, really, you have to, if your producer is saying, I think it's really good, then generally, it is, the producer is You know, he is the quality layer at the end of the day. So you kind of need to you need to trust them on that one. And look at, and this is a big thing for nowadays for artists in general. You know, if you want to get places these days, it's quality and quantity. Okay, so write loads of songs, and you know, this is a by the way, but it's something a lot of people just don't know, and you really do need to put a lot of stuff out there. Don't be kind of focusing on, you know, putting out one song or two songs, and you know, you're not famous, so you know, people end up kind of throwing in the towel. It's a long-term game, and just see it like that. Focus on your goals, and enjoy the ride then along the way.
Brilliant. Dave Skelton, producer, thank you very much. Thank you for your sage words. Everybody else, we hope that you enjoyed the conversation that me and Dave just had. There's a lot of great knowledge in there. There's some great little things to take away for singers who are more experienced, or for singers that are just curious. But working with someone like Dave in a studio, check him out at daveskelton.com. Have a nice evening.